The mist clung to Marcus Jensen's skin like a living thing as he pushed through the dense undergrowth of Viridian's northeastern jungle. Sweat trickled down his back despite the environmental controls in his expedition suit. 3 weeks into his 6-month xenobiological survey, and the planet still found ways to surprise him. Sample log 74, he murmured into his wrist recorder, carefully storing a luminescent fungus specimen. Bioluminescent properties appear to intensify at dusk. Further analysis required to determine. A sound cut through the ambient noise of the jungle, high-pitched, undulating, unmistakably a cry of pain. Marcus froze, his hand instinctively moving to the pulse pistol at his hip. The sound came again, fainter this time. Not an animal. The vocalization had too much intention. Computer, direction of last audio anomaly? His helmet display flickered. Southeast, approximately 214 meters. Marcus hesitated. Expedition protocols were clear: avoid contact with any potentially sentient species until properly authorized. But that cry. To hell with protocols, he muttered, pushing through a curtain of iridescent vines. Something was suffering, and he couldn't ignore it. He found her in a small clearing, silver-blue blood pooling beneath her trapped leg. A Lemurian, one of the indigenous sentient species that humans had only observed from a distance. Her skin had the characteristic opalescent sheen, shifting from pale lavender to cerulean as she moved. Four-fingered hands clawed desperately at the metal teeth of the trap that had snapped shut on her lower leg. When she saw him, her large, pupil-less eyes widened in terror. She let out a series of clicking sounds that his translator couldn't process, trying to push herself backward despite the agony it clearly caused. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marcus said softly, knowing she couldn't understand but hoping his tone might. He slowly removed his helmet, revealing his human face, an alien sight to her. The trap wasn't of human design. Its serrated edges had a distinctive curved pattern he recognized from briefings, Gorak's work. The aggressive predatory species that competed with Lemurians for territory were known to hunt them for sport. This wasn't just an accident, it was a deliberately set trap for a sentient being. Marcus knelt at the edge of the clearing, making his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He set down his pack and slowly pulled out his medical scanner. "I want to help," he said, gesturing to her injured leg and then to his scanner. She hissed, baring teeth that were surprisingly sharp for a primarily herbivorous species. Her luminescent markings, natural bioluminescence along her temples and forearms, pulsed with what Marcus recognized as a fear response. I know. I'm scary. You're scared. But that trap will kill you." He pointed at the trap again and made a cutting motion with his hands. Something in his eyes or voice must have reached her. Her struggling subsided slightly, though her chest still heaved with rapid breaths. When he edged closer, she didn't try to strike out. The trap mechanism was complex, pressure-sensitive with a second trigger that would inject venom if tampered with incorrectly. Marcus worked methodically, using his multi-tool to disable the poison delivery system first. "Almost there," he murmured, more to himself than to her. As he prepared to spring the main mechanism, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. The Lemurian woman's markings flashed brilliant blue in alarm, and she made an urgent gesture toward the eastern tree line. Marcus didn't need a translator to understand, danger approaching. With renewed urgency, he wedged his reinforced gloves between the trap's jaws and strained against the mechanism. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a metallic groan, the trap released its grip. The Lemurian collapsed backward, clutching her wounded leg. Silver blood welled between her fingers. Marcus quickly applied a coagulant spray from his med kit, knowing that without treatment, she would lose too much blood. A guttural snarl echoed through the trees. Heavy footfalls approached, multiple sets. The hunters were coming to check their trap. The Lemurian woman looked at Marcus with eyes that had shifted from fear to a desperate plea. She extended a trembling hand toward him and made a single melodic sound that his translator finally processed. Help. Marcus drew his pulse pistol and made his decision. He lifted the wounded alien into his arms, her body surprisingly light against his chest, and whispered, "I've got you." As the first massive shape appeared at the edge of the clearing, Marcus turned and ran, cradling his unexpected charge, deeper into the alien wilderness. Rain fell in sheets by the time Marcus reached his research outpost, a prefabricated structure camouflaged within the twisted roots of a massive banyan-like tree. The Lemurian woman had fallen silent in his arms, her breathing shallow, her luminescent markings dimmed to a faint pulse. "Computer, sterilize lab station and activate privacy shields," Marcus commanded as he approached. The outpost's exterior shimmer indicated the defensive barriers coming online, not military grade, but enough to mask their heat signatures from Gorax hunters. Inside, the single-room station transformed as partitions rose from the floor, creating a makeshift medical area. Marcus laid the alien woman on the examination table, her silver-blue blood already seeping through his hasty field dressing. "I know you can't understand me," he said softly, "but I need to treat your wound." Her eyes, iridescent pools without visible pupils, tracked his every movement. The terror had subsided, replaced by wary resignation. Whether from blood loss or a calculated decision to trust him, she made no move to resist as he cut away the fibrous material of her clothing around the injury. The trap had left deep puncture wounds in her lower leg. Unlike human blood, hers seemed to have both liquid and crystalline properties, forming a lattice-like structure where it began to clot. Marcus had studied Lemurian physiology in theory, but the practical application made him hesitate. "Computer, access xenobiology database, Lemurian circulatory system." The computer displayed a holographic anatomy chart. "Caution, information theoretical. No verified medical protocols available." "Great," Marcus muttered, reaching for a universal antibiotic gel that had tested safe for most carbon-based life. "We're both pioneers today." As he worked, the storm intensified outside, drumming against the outpost's protective shell. Thunder cracked, and the Lemurian flinched, her markings flashing bright before dimming again. "That's just thunder," Marcus explained uselessly. He finished cleaning the wound and began sealing it with a regenerative polymer. "The storm might actually help us. Gorax don't hunt well in heavy rain, their scent receptors get overwhelmed." The woman watched him with unwavering attention. Suddenly, she raised a four-fingered hand and pointed to herself. "Nylaria," she vocalized, the sound musical and complex. Marcus blinked in surprise. "You're trying to communicate." He pointed to himself. "Marcus." "Marcus," she attempted, the syllables lilting in her throat. He smiled, an expression he wasn't sure translated across species. "That's right." Working quickly, Marcus activated his research station's rudimentary translation program. It wasn't designed for first contact scenarios, but he uploaded the audio recordings of their limited exchange as a starting point. While the system processed, he turned his attention to survival necessities. The Gorax wouldn't give up easily, their species was notorious for vendettas, especially when denied prey. The outpost had supplies for one human researcher for 6 months, enough food and water, but limited defensive capabilities. "Computer, constant perimeter scan. Alert at any sign of Gorax activity." The woman, Nylaria, observed as he moved around the small space, occasionally touching her bandaged leg with an expression he interpreted as wonder. When Marcus brought her a nutrient solution specifically formulated for Lemurian biochemistry, her eyes widened. "Yes, we know about your people," he explained, handing her the container. "We've been studying Viridian for years, but contact protocols prohibited interaction." The translation program chimed, having processed enough to begin basic interpretation. Marcus activated its two-way function. "Can you understand any of this?" he asked, the system converting his words into a series of melodic tones and clicks. Nilaria's markings pulsed with excitement. She responded, and the system translated haltingly, "You, help me." "Why?" "Humans watch only. Never intervene." Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Official policy is non-interference." "But I couldn't leave you to die." The translation seemed to confuse her. She tried again, "Gorax hunt my people for generations. Your kind observe from stars. Why help now? Why, one alone?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Marcus replied simply. "One person can make that choice, even when governments can't." Something in his answer seemed to satisfy her. Her markings shifted to a warmer, amber hue. The translator struggled with her next words, but he understood the sentiment, gratitude, tinged with fear for what would come next. As if in answer, the outpost sensors chirped a warning. Movement at the perimeter, still distant but approaching, large bodies, moving with purpose even through the storm. "They're tracking us," Marcus said, checking his pulse pistol's charge. The rain didn't throw them off. Nilaria's voice came through the translator with sudden clarity, "Gorax never abandon hunt. We are prey now. Both of us." Their eyes met across the small room, human and alien, united by a single act of compassion that had now bound their fates together. Outside, the shadows of their hunters moved through the rain-lashed jungle, drawing closer with each passing minute. Nilaria reached out, her four-fingered hand hovering uncertainly in the space between them. Marcus stepped forward and took it, feeling the strange texture of her skin against his, cool, slightly textured, like living silk. "Then we'll face them together," he said, and though the translator struggled with the idiom, he knew she understood. Night fell on Viridian like a smothering blanket. The outpost's environmental controls hummed quietly as Marcus finished reinforcing the entrance, stacking equipment crates as makeshift barricades. Nilaria sat nearby, her wounded leg extended before her, hands busy weaving fibrous material from his emergency kit into primitive snares. "The translator says you're a scientist of living things," she asked, her voice clearer now as the program adapted to her speech patterns. "Xenobiologist," Marcus confirmed, securing the last crate. "I study alien life forms." The storm had finally passed, leaving a deceptive calm in its wake. "They're testing our defenses," Marcus said, checking the display. "Looking for weakness." Nilaria's markings shifted to a deep indigo. "Gorax respect strength only. They see me as prey, but you." She gestured to his frame. "They will see you as challenge." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is warning," she corrected. "Challenge means they will not stop until you are trophy." Marcus adjusted the settings on his pulse pistol, dialing up its lethality. Standard research expeditions weren't equipped for warfare, but the frontier had taught him to prepare for contingencies. He had one pulse pistol, a plasma knife, and various scientific tools that could be weaponized in emergency. "Can you tell me about them?" he asked, using the conversation to distract them both from the predators lurking outside. "The Gorax. We've observed them, but there's still so much we don't know." Nilaria's fingers nimbly completed another snare as she spoke. "They believe hunting gives them the spirit of what they kill. My people, Lemurians, they value most because we have light inside." She touched her bioluminescent markings. "They think eating our flesh gives them our inner light." "A spiritual hunt," Marcus murmured, making mental notes. This contradicted some of the prevailing theories about Gorax behavior being purely territorial. "Not spirit as you think," she clarified. "More." The translator faltered, then supplied, "Essence transfer. They take what makes us special, make it theirs." Before Marcus could respond, a heavy thud struck the outpost's exterior shell. Then another. The impacts weren't random, they followed a pattern, testing different sections of the structure's integrity. "They're probing for structural weaknesses," Marcus said, moving to the monitoring station. "Methodical. Not just brute force. Gorak smarter than humans think, Nylaria replied, her tone grim. That why we hide, not fight. A new sound reached them, scraping against the outpost's roof access panel. One of the hunters had found a potential entry point. Marcus grabbed his weapon and moved beneath the panel, signaling Nylaria to stay back. The panel groaned under immense pressure. Emergency welds would hold for minutes at most. Marcus glanced around, searching for tactical advantages in the small space. His eyes landed on the atmospheric sampling equipment, specifically, the compressed gas canisters. I have an idea, he whispered, quickly moving to disconnect one of the smaller tanks. Can you operate this? He handed Nylaria the pulse pistol. Her four-fingered hands wrapped awkwardly around the weapon, but her eyes showed understanding. Point and press. Like children's games. Exactly. But this isn't a game, he warned. Only fire if one gets past me. Marcus positioned himself beneath the groaning access panel, the modified gas canister braced against his shoulder like a primitive flamethrower. He'd rigged its release valve to create a pressurized spray that, while not lethal, would temporarily blind and disorient most carbon-based life forms. The panel finally gave way with a screech of tearing metal. A massive clawed hand reached through the opening, scaled skin the color of dried blood, fingers ending in hooked talons designed for rending flesh. Marcus triggered the canister. Compressed gas erupted upward in a powerful jet, carrying caustic chemical compounds directly into the face of the Gorak's hunter. A guttural roar of pain shook the outpost as the creature recoiled, tumbling from the roof in its disorientation. One down, Marcus said, already moving to reseal the compromised panel. Temporarily. Nylaria's markings pulsed with a pattern that the translator didn't need to interpret, impressed and surprised. You fight like... One had begun digging beneath the structure, targeting the foundation. They're adapting, Marcus noted with grim admiration. Learning from each failure. No trades, Marcus said firmly. We survive together or not at all. Marcus and Nylaria moved back to back, he with his improvised chemical weapon, she with the pulse pistol. The floor plates bulged upward as something massive forced its way through. Aim for the eyes, Marcus instructed, heart pounding as the first glimpse of scaled flesh appeared through the widening gap. And don't stop firing until it stops moving. As the first hunter burst into their sanctuary, roaring its primal challenge, Marcus felt Nylaria press against his back, two beings from different worlds, united against a common threat, fighting not just for survival but for the principle that had brought them together, the value of a life, regardless of species. 3 days had passed since the attack. 3 days of uneasy vigilance, of sleeping in shifts, of wounds slowly healing. The Goraks had retreated after their failed assault, one dead, another seriously injured by Nylaria's surprisingly accurate pulse fire. But Marcus knew they hadn't given up, they were regrouping, perhaps calling for reinforcements. The outpost bore the scars of battle, scorched panels, makeshift repairs, equipment repurposed into defensive measures. Marcus had sent emergency signals to the orbital research station, but the dense atmospheric conditions meant a response could take weeks to arrive. In the confined space of their sanctuary, something unexpected was happening between the human and the Lemurian. Your language has too many unnecessary sounds, Nylaria observed as they shared a meal of synthesized proteins. Her wounded leg was healing remarkably fast, Lemurian regenerative capabilities far exceeded human standards. Says the woman whose native tongue includes ultrasonic frequencies I can't even hear, Marcus replied with a smile. The translator rendered their banter imperfectly, but they'd begun developing their own hybrid communication, a mixture of simplified English, Lemurian clicking sounds Marcus could approximate, and a growing collection of shared gestures. Why did you come to our world? Nylaria asked, her luminescent markings shifting to the pale green that Marcus had learned indicated curiosity. Your people watch from distance for years. Why study up close now? Marcus considered how to explain human scientific methods and politics to someone from a completely different evolutionary path. We move cautiously. First observe, then interact. My mission was the next step, detailed study of Viridian's ecosystem. Not supposed to contact intelligent species yet. Yet you broke rules for me. Her markings pulsed briefly with a color he hadn't seen before, a deep violet with gold undertones. I did, he acknowledged. Some things matter more than rules. Their conversation was interrupted by a perimeter alert, movement in the dense foliage beyond their sensors, but not the distinctive heat signature of Gorax hunters. Probably one of the larger herbivores seeking shelter. Marcus reset the alarm and turned back to find Nylaria much closer than before, studying him with obvious fascination. Without the translator between them, she reached out and traced the contours of his face with her four-fingered hand. Your skin, she said softly. So different. Warm. Soft. The touch sent an unexpected shiver through him. 3 days of shared danger, of learning each other's ways, had eroded the barriers of species. He found himself equally fascinated by her, the opalescent quality of her skin, the way her markings shifted with her emotions, the grace of her movements despite their alien quality. Is this permitted? She asked hesitantly, her hand still resting against his cheek. Marcus wasn't sure if she meant by his people, by hers, or by the unspoken rules that governed their current situation. He only knew that in this moment, isolated from both their worlds, conventional boundaries seemed increasingly meaningless. There are no rules here, he replied. Only what we choose. Something changed in her expression, a decision made. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched, a gesture he somehow understood held deep significance for her people. My life essence to yours, she whispered, the translator struggling with concepts that transcended direct conversion. In my culture, saving a life creates bond. Unbreakable. We have similar beliefs, Marcus said, his voice dropping to match her hushed tone. What followed was an exploration unlike any in his scientific career, the discovery of how two beings from different worlds could bridge the chasm between them. Their anatomies were different yet complementary, as though some cosmic coincidence had made them compatible despite evolving on planets light-years apart. Her luminescence responded to his touch, creating patterns of light that transformed the utilitarian outpost into something ethereal. When they finally came together, it was with wonder rather than awkwardness, each movement a question and answer, each touch a new discovery. Afterward, as Viridian's twin moons cast violet shadows through the outpost's viewport, Nylaria's markings glowed with a sustained amber warmth that Marcus now recognized as contentment. There is word, she said, tracing patterns on his chest. In old Lemurian language. Kethanar means one who carries another's light. No direct translation. Soulmate? Marcus suggested, the term feeling simultaneously inadequate and presumptuous. She made the clicking sound he recognized as amusement. Perhaps. Though we have no concept of soul. We say light, the essence that continues when body ends. The comfortable silence that followed was broken by her next question, what happens when your people come? The question hit Marcus like cold water. He'd been avoiding that particular thought, focusing instead on immediate survival. I don't know, he admitted. Contact protocols weren't meant to be broken this way. I cannot return to my settlement, she said matter-of-factly. To be saved by human is complicated. Some would see contamination. And I've definitely violated every research principle in the handbook, Marcus added with a wry smile that faded quickly. They might recall me to Earth. Standard procedure for protocol violations. Nylaria's markings dimmed slightly. Worlds apart again. Unless. Marcus sat up, an idea forming. Anthropological research exchange. There's precedent, not with Lemurians specifically, but with other contacted species. Scientific cooperation. Hope flickered in her alien eyes. You would take me to stars? Or I could stay here, he said, surprising himself with how appealing that alternative suddenly seemed. Learn your ways. Properly document Lemurian culture. She touched his face again, her expression unreadable to human eyes but her meaning clear from the vibrant pulse of her markings. Perhaps bridge between worlds starts with bridge between two people. The perimeter alarm sounded again, this time with the unmistakable heat signature of multiple Goraks approaching from the north. The brief idyll was over, reality had returned. They moved with practiced efficiency, gathering weapons and taking defensive positions. But something fundamental had changed. They fought now not just for survival, but for a future neither had imagined possible days earlier. As they prepared to defend their sanctuary once more, Nylaria placed her hand over his heart. Whatever comes, Marcus of Earth, my light recognizes yours. He covered her hand with his own. And mine yours, Nylaria of Viridian. Outside, the hunters approached, unaware that their prey had found something worth fighting for beyond mere survival, a connection that transcended the boundaries of worlds. Dawn broke over Viridian's horizon, painting the jungle canopy in shades of crimson and gold. Inside the battered outpost, Marcus checked the ammunition in his pulse pistol, 3 charges remaining. Beside him, Nylaria calibrated the makeshift sonic emitter they'd constructed from research equipment, her luminescent markings pulsing with determined focus. 6 hunters now, she said, reading the scanner display. Pack leader has come. Marcus nodded grimly. The Goraks had indeed called reinforcements, including a brood patriarch, nearly 9 feet tall according to the thermal imaging. Their tactics had grown more coordinated with each attack, the last one nearly breaching the eastern wall before they'd managed to drive them back. The emergency beacon is still transmitting, Marcus said, more to reassure himself than her. Response team should arrive within 48 hours. We will not have 48 hours, Nylaria replied pragmatically. Goraks will attack at midday. Their tradition. She had explained it the night before. Goraks' hunting rituals included specific times for killing prey, believing the position of Viridian's sun influenced the quality of the essence they consumed. Midday was reserved for worthy adversaries who had proven their strength. Then we need to be ready. Marcus moved to the monitoring station, bringing up a terrain map of the surrounding area. We can't keep playing defense. Nylaria joined him, her shoulder pressing against his in what had become a habitual gesture of solidarity. What are you thinking? An ambush, he said, pointing to a narrow ravine half a kilometer east. If we can lure them there, the sonic emitter's frequency will be amplified by the rock walls. Could disable several at once. She studied the map, then nodded. Bold. Dangerous. A pause, then, I like it. Over the past week, they'd become so attuned to each other's thoughts and movements that they worked in seamless coordination. As they prepared, loading essential supplies into portable packs and concealing traps around the outpost, they moved like dancers following a choreography only they understood. When the time came to leave their sanctuary, Nylaria paused at the threshold, her markings shifting through a complex pattern of colors. What is it? Marcus asked. Sending prayer to ancestors, she explained. Asking them to guide our path. Marcus touched the small pendant he wore beneath his expedition suit, his grandfather's compass, a relic from Earth's oceans. I understand. Outside, Viridian's jungle enveloped them in its alien embrace, massive fern-like structures filtering the sunlight, floating spores creating a perpetual golden haze. They moved swiftly but cautiously, Nylaria leading with an innate understanding of the terrain that no amount of human training could match. They reached the ravine with an hour to spare. As Marcus set up the sonic emitter, calibrating it to the specific frequency that disrupted Gorak's neural pathways, Nylaria arranged crystalline shards scavenged from the outpost's damaged communication array. These will amplify sound waves, she explained, positioning them with mathematical precision. And this, She held up a small vial of silvery fluid. "We'll draw them to us." "What is it?" "My blood," she said simply. "They can detect it from great distance. Smell of Lemurian blood drives them to frenzy." Marcus stared at her, understanding the risk she was taking. "Nylaria." "Only way," she interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "Bait must be real." As they completed their preparations, taking positions on a ledge overlooking the ravine, Marcus found himself struck by the absurdity and wonder of their situation, a human xenobiologist and a Lemurian woman, united by circumstance, now fighting side by side against a common enemy. "If we survive this," he said quietly, "I want you to know." She placed her fingers against his lips. "When we survive. Not if." Her markings pulsed with the deep violet gold he now recognized as affection. "And I already know." The first Gorax appeared at the ravine's eastern entrance precisely at midday, its massive form moving with surprising stealth for something so large. The others followed, 6 hunters in formation, armed with a combination of primitive weapons and stolen technology, their scaled bodies adorned with trophies from previous kills. Nylaria uncapped the vial, letting a single drop of her blood fall onto the stones below. The lead Gorax instantly raised its head, nostrils flaring. A guttural command issued from its throat, and the hunting party changed direction, moving directly toward their position. "Now," Marcus whispered. Nylaria activated the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The sonic weapon operated at frequencies beyond human hearing. Then the effects became visible. The Gorax staggered, their coordinated movements dissolving into confusion. 2 dropped to their knees, clawing at their auditory organs. "It's working," Marcus said, readying his pulse pistol. But the pack leader pushed forward despite its obvious pain, its eyes fixed on their position with terrible intelligence. It raised a crude launcher to its shoulder, salvaged technology that it shouldn't have been able to operate. "Down!" Marcus shouted, pulling Nylaria behind the rocky outcropping just as an explosion rocked their position. The sonic emitter shattered, its components scattered across the ravine floor. What followed was chaos, a desperate struggle against superior numbers and strength. Marcus fired with precision, each pulse blast finding its mark, but the Gorax kept coming. Nylaria wielded a makeshift spear fashioned from outpost debris, her movements fluid and deadly. They fought back to back, communicating without words, anticipating each other's needs with preternatural awareness. 3 hunters fell to their combined assault, but the others pressed forward, driven by bloodlust and ritualistic determination. The pack leader cornered them against the ravine wall, its massive form blocking any escape. Blood, both silver blue and dark red, stained the stones beneath their feet. Marcus's pulse pistol clicked empty, Nylaria's spear had broken against a hunter's armored hide. "Together," she said, taking his hand as they faced what seemed inevitable defeat. The Gorax patriarch raised its weapon for a killing blow, and then froze, its attention captured by something in the sky above. A shadow passed over the ravine, accompanied by the distinctive hum of ion engines. "The response team," Marcus breathed, looking up to see the sleek form of a human dropship descending through Viridian's atmosphere. The Gorax hesitated, caught between its prey and this new threat. The moment of indecision proved fatal. A precision shot from the dropship's defense system struck the Patriarch squarely, vaporizing it instantly. The remaining hunters scattered, disappearing into the dense jungle. As the dropship touched down nearby, Marcus turned to Nylaria, suddenly concerned about what would happen next. "Stay with me," he said urgently. "Whatever they say, whatever protocols they cite, we stay together." Her markings pulsed with calm assurance. "Where else would I go? My path is with you now." The dropship's hatch opened, revealing a team of heavily armed security personnel and a familiar face, Dr. Eleanor Voss, Marcus's expedition supervisor. "Jensen," she called, hurrying toward them. "What in God's name happened here?" "Your emergency beacon," she stopped short, finally registering Nilaria's presence. "Is that a Lemurian?" Marcus stepped forward, keeping Nilaria's hand firmly in his. "Dr. Voss, this is Nilaria. She's under my protection and requesting scientific asylum. We have much to report." Eleanor's expression cycled through shock, professional interest, and finally, reluctant acceptance. "This violates every contact protocol in the book, Jensen." "Yes," he agreed simply. "And I'd do it again." The journey back to the orbital research station was tense with debriefings and medical examinations. The scientific community erupted in both outrage and fascination at the unprecedented contact. But as the weeks passed, something remarkable began to emerge from the controversy. Nilaria became the first official Lemurian ambassador to humanity, her knowledge and perspective offering insights that decades of distant observation had failed to provide. Marcus, after a formal reprimand that did little to dampen his reputation, was appointed liaison to the newly established cultural exchange program. 6 months after their rescue, they stood together on the observation deck of the orbital station, watching as the first sanctioned human delegation prepared to make contact with Nilaria's settlement. "Your people accepted me more easily than I expected," she said, her markings rippling with thoughtful blue tones. "Perhaps humans are more adaptable than Lemurian legends suggest." "Or perhaps," Marcus replied, drawing her close, "they recognized what I did from the beginning, that compassion transcends differences." Below them, Viridian turned slowly on its axis, jungles and oceans merging into a tapestry of blues and greens, no longer just a research subject, but the birthplace of something unprecedented. A bridge between worlds that began with a simple choice in a fog-laden jungle, to help rather than observe, to save rather than study. "The Goraks have withdrawn from our territories," Nilaria noted, reading the latest intelligence reports. "Your people's presence has discouraged them." "Temporarily," Marcus cautioned. "We'll need a permanent solution if our peoples are to coexist peacefully on Viridian." She turned to him, her luminescence shifting to the now familiar violet gold that he had come to cherish. "We found our solution. Perhaps our peoples will too." As the delegation shuttle launched toward the surface, Marcus reflected on the chain of events that a single act of mercy had set in motion, a human and an alien, once separated by light years of space and evolutionary divergence, now standing united, their joined hands a living symbol of possibility. "What lies ahead," he said softly, "we'll face together." Nilaria's markings pulsed in agreement, their glow reflecting in the viewport as Viridian's twin suns rose on the horizon, illuminating the path forward for two beings who had found in each other not just salvation, but a future neither could have imagined alone.